Welcome to week 5. On the agenda for today, we're going to start working on distractions. So we need to know how to break exercises down into their smallest components, why success is important, and then juggling the 3 Ds: distance, duration, and distraction. This week, we're going to start working on distractions a little bit more frequently. One thing with distraction work is that everybody is chomping at the bit to really just make behaviors reliable in high distractions. But if we make that jump too drastically, what we'll see is that the dogs will fail. And that failure is the result of not accounting for how difficult distractions really are and the fact that our dogs don't generalize well. Success is really critical in our training. When we're moving into higher distractions, if we bump those distractions too quickly, we'll start to see failure after failure after failure. And the problem with that is that if we're yelling out cues where our dogs can't respond, we're actually wearing down the use of those cues. We can also create frustration both for the dogs and for ourselves. And one of the things with frustration is that if either of us get too frustrated, training stops altogether. We have to keep motivation intact in order to proceed into the higher distraction realms. But that means accounting for those different components to distractions. So what are those 3 components? Well, they're duration, distance, and distraction. We'll talk about distance first because this is usually most intuitive for people. If you're really close to a distraction, it's going to be a lot harder for your dog to perform around that distraction than if you're really far away. Duration is the least intuitive for people, but is actually most versatile. With duration, we've got this kind of continuum of time. So if a dog first spots a distraction, you've got this little sliver of time to be able to refocus the dog on you. And if you catch them in that moment, you're likely to be able to get a response from the dog. But as the dog gets more engaged with the novelty of the new distraction, we start to lose the ability to get behaviors. And then on the far end of that, after the novelty is worn off, we'll start to be able to get behaviors again. The last component to this is the distraction itself. And what I mean by that is the intensity of it. So say you're working against another dog and you guys want your dogs to be able to perform. It's going to be a lot easier early on for you to use a dog that is, quietly laying down facing away from your dog than trying to train your dog around a dog that's barking and lunging. And you have to be really selective about this when you're going into the real world. If you try and ask for behaviors on that barking and lunging dog to your dog, it's going to be really hard for your dog to perform. They've got bigger fish to fry. They've got higher distractions that are competing with you. So we really need to start to build up their success rate gradually where they can have a lot of success and then kind of move it into those higher realm distractions as they start to understand that, hey, this is always the best response for me. So juggling the 3 Ds of distractions. 1, if you guys are working against a high intensity distraction like a barking and lunging dog, we might move our dog further away from that dog before requesting a behavior. We might also opt for the duration piece. So before our dogs get entrenched in that type of distraction, we might cue the behavior early. So they spotted it and immediately we're cueing a behavior to get them refocused on us. So the next activity that we're going to do is actually a greeting control activity. Now with greeting control, we're working against a friendly stranger. We don't know how excited that person's going to be or if they're going to be more subdued, so we can't really factor the intensity of the distraction. Generally in greetings, we're also in very close proximity, and so we can't really use the distance component there. So what we do is we opt for duration. And in this case, we're going to go with a very short duration of exposure. What you guys will see is that as I'm approaching Val, who is actually playing the handler role, your role, I'm going to reach out my hand. I'm doing that to give the dog a low target. We're going to bank on the idea that the dog is going to do a touch target in that moment. And then Val is going to feed away. So she's going to mark for the touch while the dog is in contact and then deliver the feet strategically to move the dog out of the distraction zone. She's getting that distance that she needs to refocus the dog. Your objective right now is to not start training in the real world. Your job is to provide training setups that simulate the real world at a degree where your dog can have success. Once your setups match real life intensity, then your behaviors can be transferred to real world applications. This takes time, patience, and lots of practice. Most of our students opt for Beyond the Backyard class to move behaviors from controlled to real life. So while we're starting on it in level 1, the bulk of distraction work is done in level 2. Beyond the Backyard breaks exercises down into really easily attainable goals, which will fast track your behaviors into high reliability. Move on to Touch Target for greeting control next, where you'll see us juggling the 3 Ds for success.